The champagne cork popped with a sound that made me flinch. My father's face broke into a rare smile as he poured the golden liquid into our good crystal glasses, the ones we only used for special occasions. Daniel sat at the head of our dining room table, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. In a way, he had. "To Harvard Law," my father announced, raising his glass high. "To my brilliant son." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The letter lay spread across the mahogany table, its crimson letterhead catching the light from our chandelier. "We are pleased to inform you." I'd read those words 3 times already, each time feeling something twist deeper in my chest. "I knew it," my mother said, her voice pitched with excitement. "I told Mrs. Rodriguez next door that our Daniel would get into Harvard. She didn't believe me, but I knew." She smoothed her perfectly styled hair, already rehearsing the story she'd tell at the country club tomorrow. Daniel accepted their praise with the casual confidence of someone who'd always been told he was destined for greatness. "The LSAT prep really paid off," he said, swirling his champagne. "Though honestly, I wasn't worried. My undergraduate record spoke for itself." I sat at the far end of the table, my water glass untouched, watching this celebration unfold like a movie I wasn't really part of. At 17, I was 3 years younger than Daniel, but in that moment, I felt ancient. The weight of unspoken dreams pressed against my ribs. "What about you, Sophia?" Aunt Rose's voice cut through the praise fest. She'd been quiet until now, nursing her glass and watching me with those knowing eyes. "Senior year's coming up. Have you thought about college?" The room fell silent. My parents' smiles flickered like candles in a sudden breeze. Daniel raised his eyebrow, his expression shifting to something between amusement and condescension. I cleared my throat, feeling heat creep up my neck. "I've been thinking about maybe studying literature or history. I really love—" "Don't be ridiculous, Sophia." My father's voice cut through my tentative words like a blade. He set down his champagne glass with a sharp clink against the table. "College isn't for everyone, Sophia. You need to be realistic about your capabilities." My mother's gaze found the centerpiece, studying the roses as if they held the secrets of the universe. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "Dad, I have a 3.7 GPA, I said, quietly. "My English teacher says—" "High school grades don't mean anything," Daniel interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "College is a different beast entirely. The reading load alone would crush you, Soph. Remember how you struggled with that one history paper last year?" I remembered. I'd spent weeks researching the Industrial Revolution, fascinated by the human stories buried in the factory records and immigration documents. My teacher had praised my unique perspective and compelling analysis, but I'd turned it in 2 days late because I'd gotten so absorbed in the research that I'd lost track of time. "That's exactly what I mean," my father said, nodding at Daniel as if he'd made a brilliant point. "You're not focused. You daydream. You get distracted by irrelevant details." He fixed me with a steady stare. "College would be a waste of money, Sophia. You're not cut out for that kind of work. Don't set yourself up for failure." The words hit me like physical blows. "You're not cut out for that. Don't set yourself up for failure." But the one that echoed loudest, the one that would replay in my head for years to come, was what he said next. "You're too stupid for college, sweetheart. There's no shame in knowing your limitations." My mother's fork scraped against her plate. Still, she said nothing. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing he'd gone too far, but he didn't correct our father. Instead, he raised his glass again. "To realistic expectations," he said with a forced laugh. I felt something inside me shrivel and die. The dreams I'd been nurturing, late nights reading everything from Jane Austen to James Baldwin, imagining myself in lecture halls discussing the books that made my heart race, seemed to crumble like old paper. "Excuse me," I whispered, pushing back from the table. "Sophia, wait." Aunt Rosa's chair scraped against the hardwood as she stood, but I was already moving toward the stairs. I made it to my bedroom before the tears came. Hot, angry tears that I muffled against my pillow. Through the heating vent, I could hear the celebration resume downstairs, my father's voice booming about Daniel's bright future. A soft knock interrupted my crying. "Mija?" Aunt Rosa's voice was gentle through the door. "Come in," I managed. She entered with 2 cups of tea, settling beside me on my narrow bed. Rosa had always been different from the rest of my family, softer somehow, more willing to see beneath surfaces. "Your father is wrong," she said simply, pressing the warm mug into my hands.
But what if he's not? What if I really am? Stop. Her voice was firm but kind. I've watched you since you were little, Sophia. You see the world differently than they do. You ask questions that make people uncomfortable because they force us to think deeper. That's not stupidity. That's wisdom. I looked at her through my tears. Then why don't they see it? Rosa was quiet for a long moment, steam from her tea crowing between us like incense. Sometimes people can only recognize intelligence that looks like their own. Your brother memorizes facts and regurgitates them perfectly. Your father sees success in straight lines, good grades, prestigious schools, high-paying jobs. But intelligence comes in many forms, Mija. She reached over and brushed a tear from my cheek. You may not follow their path, but that doesn't mean you won't find your own way to greatness. Don't let them shrink you down to fit their narrow understanding of worth. After she left, I sat by my window, looking out at our manicured suburban lawn. Other houses lined our street, their windows glowing warm and yellow in the evening light. Behind each window were families having their own conversations, making their own plans, holding their own dreams. I made a promise to myself that night, whispered into the darkness of my room. Someday, I would prove them wrong. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I would show them that intelligence couldn't be measured in college acceptance letters or parental approval. I just had to figure out how to believe it myself first. 3 years later, I stood behind the counter of Murphy's coffee shop, steam rising from the espresso machine as I crafted another perfect latte for the morning rush. My name tag read, "Sophia, ask me about our pastries." But most customers barely glanced at me, too focused on their phones or their important meetings to notice the girl making their drinks. Daniel had graduated Harvard Law the previous spring. The photos from his ceremony still decorated our mantelpiece at home, him in his cap and gown, our parents beaming on either side like they'd personally achieved this milestone. He'd landed a position at a prestigious firm in Manhattan, and every Sunday dinner became a progress report on his cases, his salary, his corner office with the view of Central Park. Meanwhile, I lived in a studio apartment above Mrs. Chen's dry cleaning shop, splitting my time between the coffee shop and weekend bookkeeping jobs for small businesses around town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every dollar I earned felt like a small victory against the voice in my head that still whispered, too stupid," during quiet moments. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed, and I looked up to see Daniel himself walking in, his expensive suit cutting a sharp silhouette against the morning light. He rarely came to this part of town anymore. Our old neighborhood was beneath him now. "Sophie!" He approached the counter with that practiced smile he'd perfected for courtrooms and client meetings. "I didn't know you worked here." 3 months now," I said, wiping down the counter between us. "What can I get you?" "Large coffee, black, and—" He glanced around the small shop with its mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. "This is nice. Quaint." I poured his coffee, noting how he emphasized quaint, like it was something to be pitied. "It pays the bills." "Still doing those little bookkeeping jobs, too?" The way he said little made my shoulders tense. "Mom mentioned you were helping some restaurant owner with their taxes?" 3 restaurant owners, actually, plus a hair salon and 2 retail stores. I handed him his coffee, our fingers brushing briefly. Small businesses need help, too. Daniel pulled out a $20 bill for his $3 coffee, the gesture as pointed as everything else about him. "Keep the change. You know, if you're serious about business stuff, I could probably get you an interview for a receptionist position at my firm. It's not much, but it's better than—" He gestured vaguely at the coffee shop. I'm good, thanks. Sophie. His voice softened, taking on that patronizing tone I remembered from childhood. Don't you think it's time to be realistic about your future? I mean, this is fine for now, but what's your long-term plan? You can't serve coffee forever. I could have told him about the business proposal I'd been working on. Pages and pages of research about financial consulting for small businesses that the big firms ignored. I could have mentioned the economics textbooks I'd been reading late at night or the online courses I was taking in accounting and business management. But Daniel wouldn't have understood that someone could educate herself outside the walls of an institution he recognized. Instead, I just smiled. I'm figuring it out as I go. After he left, I found myself scrubbing the espresso machine harder than necessary, working out frustration with each circular motion. The truth was, I was figuring it out, slowly, carefully, one small step at a time. But my family's version of success was so loud, so celebrated, that my quiet progress felt invisible to even me sometimes.
That evening, I spread my current project across my tiny kitchen table. Mrs. Martinez, who owned a small Mexican restaurant on the east side, had brought me boxes of receipts and bank statements that hadn't been properly organized in 2 years. Most accounting firms wouldn't touch a mess this size for what she could afford to pay, but I found a strange satisfaction in creating order from chaos. As I worked, sorting receipts by category and building spreadsheets, I thought about what Aunt Rosa had said years ago. You ask questions that make people uncomfortable because they force us to think deeper. Mrs. Martinez's restaurant was struggling, but not because she couldn't cook or run a business. She was brilliant at what she did. Her tamales were legendary, her customer service impeccable. She was struggling because she didn't have the systems in place to track her expenses properly, which meant she couldn't see where money was being wasted or identify her most profitable items. I spent hours that night creating not just organized books, but a dashboard that would help her understand her business better. Charts showing seasonal trends, breakdowns of food cost versus labor, projections based on different scenarios. It was work that went far beyond what she was paying me for, but I couldn't help myself. I could see solutions where others only saw problems. By midnight, I had something beautiful, a clear picture of a business that could thrive with the right information. I made notes about menu optimization, suggestions for reducing waste, ideas for marketing her most popular items. Mrs. Martinez would be able to make informed decisions instead of guessing. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. This was the work that made me come alive, even if no one in my family understood its value. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. "How's my favorite niece tonight?" I smiled, typing back, "Working on something that might actually matter." It all matters, mija. Every step forward is a victory. I looked around my small apartment, the stack of business books on my nightstand, the corkboard covered with ideas for helping small businesses, the folder labeled Future Plans that grew thicker each month. This wasn't the path anyone expected for me, but it was becoming undeniably mine. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Martinez called me in tears. "Sophia, I don't know how to thank you. I've saved more money in the past month than I have in the past year, just from following your suggestions. My accountant, the one I pay 5 times what I pay you, he never showed me anything like this." Her words stayed with me as I walked home that evening, past the coffee shop where I worked mornings, past the dry cleaner where Mrs. Chen always waved behind stacks of pressed shirts. This neighborhood was full of small business owners, like Mrs. Martinez, smart, hardworking people who just needed someone to help them see their own potential. I thought about Daniel and his corner office handling mergers and acquisitions for companies that already had everything. Important work, maybe, but was it work that changed lives? That night, I started a new document on my laptop, Alvarez Financial Consulting Business Plan Draft Number 1.
I wrote until dawn, fueled by coffee and the growing certainty that I was finally on the right path, even if it wasn't a path my family would ever understand. The accounting conference was the last place I expected to meet anyone interesting, let alone someone who would change everything. I'd used my savings to attend the Small Business Financial Solutions workshop, sitting in the back row of a hotel conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Most of the other attendees were older men in rumpled suits who kept checking their phones during the presentations. I felt out of place in my carefully chosen business casual outfit, a navy blazer I'd found at a thrift store, and my best pair of black pants. But I was determined to learn everything I could about tax strategies and financial planning for small businesses. During the lunch break, I found myself standing alone by the sad buffet spread, debating whether the wilted salad was worth risking food poisoning. That's when someone behind me said, "The sandwiches are safer. I saw them bring those out 10 minutes ago." I turned to find a man about my age with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He was Asian American with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and he wore a button-down shirt that managed to both look professional and approachable. "Thanks for the tip," I said, reaching for a turkey sandwich. "I'm Sophia." David Chen." He grabbed a sandwich for himself and gestured towards an empty table by the window. "Want to sit together? I promise I won't quiz you on depreciation schedules." I laughed, surprising myself. "Only if you promise not to judge me for taking notes on napkins. I forgot my notebook." "A fellow note-taker. I like you already."
So, what brings you to the thrilling world of small business accounting? He asked, unwrapping his sandwich. I run my own bookkeeping service, I said, then immediately felt the need to qualify it. Well, it's small, just me, really. I work with restaurant owners, small retailers, people like that. David's eyes lit up. That's fantastic. Those are the businesses that need the most help but get the least attention from big firms. He leaned forward, genuinely interested. How did you get started? Most people asked about my credentials first, my education, my formal training. David asked about my work itself, and something in my chest loosened. I started helping a restaurant owner organize her books, and I realized she wasn't the only one struggling with this stuff. These business owners are brilliant at what they do. They can run a kitchen, manage employees, create amazing food, but the financial side overwhelms them. Because it's not their passion, David nodded, but it's yours. I paused, sandwich halfway to my mouth. No one had ever called bookkeeping my passion before. I guess it is. I love taking something messy and complicated and making it clear, helping people see patterns they couldn't see before, showing them where their money's actually going. That's problem solving at its finest, David said. You're like a financial detective. I found myself smiling. I've never thought of it that way, but yes, exactly. We talked through the entire lunch break and ended up sitting together for the afternoon sessions. David worked as a freelance business consultant, helping small companies streamline their operations. He'd gone to business school, but had left a corporate job to work directly with entrepreneurs. The corporate world felt like playing someone else's game, he explained during another break. I wanted to help people build something of their own. After the conference ended, David walked me to my car in the hotel parking garage. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh shadows. This might be forward, but would you like to get dinner? I know a great Thai place, and I'd love to hear more about your business. I hesitated. Dating hadn't been a priority. Between work and building my consulting practice, I barely had time for sleep, let alone relationships. But something about David felt different, safe. I'd like that, I said. Over pad thai and spring rolls at a small restaurant with mismatched tables and the best food I'd ever tasted, David asked questions that no one in my family had ever thought to ask. He wanted to know about my biggest challenges, my favorite success stories, my plans for growth. You know what impresses me most? He said, setting down his chopsticks. You're not just keeping books. You're genuinely helping these business owners understand their own companies better. That's consulting, not just bookkeeping. My family doesn't really see it that way, I found myself admitting. It thinks it's just small. David's expression grew serious. Small in scale doesn't mean small in impact. How many businesses have you helped? I counted in my head. 12, over the past year.
12 families who can pay their bills, keep their employees, serve their communities. That's not small, Sophia. That's significant. Something in my throat tightened. I'd been carrying my family's dismissal for so long that hearing someone else articulate the value of my work felt overwhelming. My brother is a lawyer at a big firm in Manhattan. Corporate law, mergers and acquisitions. My parents are so proud. I'm sure they are, but what you're doing matters just as much, maybe more. David leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. You're helping people chase their dreams, build something with their own hands. Your brother helps rich companies get richer. Both have value, but don't let anyone convince you that his work is more important than yours. I stared at him across the small table, this man I'd met 6 hours ago, and felt something shift inside my chest. For the first time in my adult life, someone saw what I was building and called it worthwhile. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For seeing me. David reached across the table and covered my hand. You're pretty hard to miss, Sofia Alvarez. We stayed at that restaurant until they started stacking chairs on tables around us. David told me about his own struggles with family expectations. His parents wanted him to be a doctor, and his decision to leave corporate consulting had disappointed them initially.
But they came around when they saw I was happier, more fulfilled. Sometimes families just need time to understand that success looks different than they imagined. I wanted to believe him, but my family's dismissal felt more fundamental than disappointment. It felt like they'd decided long ago who I was and what I was capable of, and no evidence to the contrary would change their minds. When David walked me to my car again, he paused before I could open the door. Would you be interested in collaborating sometime? I have clients who need exactly what you offer, and I could use your financial expertise on some of my operational consulting projects. My heart jumped. Really? Really? We could help a lot of businesses together, Sophia, if you're interested. I thought about Mrs. Martinez and her thriving restaurant, about all the other business owners who needed someone to help them see their own potential clearly. Yes, I said. I'm very interested. David smiled, and in the harsh parking garage lights, it looked like sunrise. This could be the beginning of something good, he said. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for a successful business partnership, but for the possibility that I might be building something meaningful, something that mattered, something that no one could dismiss as small. For the first time since that terrible dinner when I was 17, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was exactly smart enough for whatever came next. The Sunday dinner invitation came 3 months after David and I had officially launched Alvarez Chen Financial Consulting. We'd been working 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and the intoxicating rush of building something that mattered. Our client list had grown to 23 small businesses, and we'd just helped a struggling bakery turn their first profit in 2 years. I almost declined the dinner invitation. Sunday evenings had become sacred work time for David and me, quiet hours when we could plan the upcoming week without interruption. But my mother's voice had carried that particular edge that meant refusal wasn't really an option. Daniel has news to share, she said over the phone. Important news. The whole family should be together. I should have known it would be another celebration of Daniel's achievements, another opportunity for my parents to bask in reflected glory. But some stubborn part of me hoped this time might be different. Maybe they'd ask about my business, show interest in what I was building. The dining room looked exactly as it had 5 years ago when Daniel's Harvard acceptance letter had been spread across the mahogany table. Same crystal glasses, same carefully arranged centerpiece, same expectant energy crackling through the air. Daniel sat in his usual spot, the seat of honor to my father's right, wearing a satisfied smile that made my stomach clench. Before we eat, my father announced, raising his wine glass, we have something wonderful to celebrate. Daniel? My brother cleared his throat dramatically. Well,
I've been offered a partnership track position at Goldman and Associates, youngest associate they've ever promoted. He paused for effect, basking in our parents' delighted gasps. The salary increase is substantial. My mother pressed her hands to her chest. Oh, Daniel, a partner. I'm so proud I could burst. This calls for champagne, my father declared, already moving toward the kitchen. This is what hard work and intelligence look like, son. You've made us so proud. I sat in my designated spot at the far end of the table, watching this familiar dance of adoration. The praise flowed like water. Daniel's brilliance, his dedication, his bright future. My parents hung on his every word as he described his corner office renovation, his new BMW, the vacation home he was considering in the Hamptons. What about you, Sophia? Daniel asked suddenly, turning his attention to me with that patronizing smile I'd learned to dread. Still doing your little bookkeeping business? The room fell silent. My parents looked at me with the polite interest they might show to a stranger at a party. Actually, I said carefully, David and I have expanded into full financial consulting. We're helping small businesses with strategic planning, operational efficiency, growth projections. How sweet, my mother interrupted, her tone suggesting I'd just told her about a particularly charming hobby. It's nice that you're keeping busy. My father returned with champagne, pouring generous glasses for everyone except me. He handed me water without asking if I wanted wine. The slight felt intentional, a reminder of my place in this family hierarchy. You know, Sophia, my father said, settling back into his chair, now that Daniel is doing so well, maybe it's time you considered a more stable path. He could probably help you get an entry-level position at a real firm.
A real firm? The words came out sharper than I intended. You know what I mean. Something with benefits, security, a future. These little side businesses rarely amount to anything long-term. He waved his hand dismissively. It's fine as a hobby, but at some point you need to be practical. I felt heat rising in my chest. 23 businesses disagree with you. We've helped them save over $200,000 collectively in the past 6 months alone. Daniel laughed. That's cute, Soph, but we're talking about real money, real careers. I made more than I'm in bonuses last quarter. This isn't about money, I said, my voice starting to shake with controlled anger. It's about impact. These are families, people's dreams. Dreams don't pay rent, my father cut in. You're 25 years old. When are you going to stop playing pretend and join the real world? Something inside me snapped. All those years of biting my tongue, of accepting their casual dismissals, of pretending their words didn't cut deep, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I may not be like Daniel, I said quietly, standing up from my chair, but that doesn't make me less. The room went still. My mother's fork suspended halfway to her mouth, Daniel's satisfied smile faltering for the first time all evening. I'm not playing pretend, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I'm building something meaningful. I'm helping people who've been overlooked by the real firms because they're not profitable enough, not important enough. I'm doing work that matters. Sophia, my mother said in that tone she used when she thought I was being overly emotional. There's no need to be so sensitive. We're just trying to help. No, you're not. The words hung in the air like smoke. You've never once asked about my business. You don't know my clients' names or what I've accomplished. You only see me as a disappointment because I'm not Daniel. My father's face had gone red. You're being dramatic. We've always supported. When? When have you supported me? When you told me I was too stupid for college? When you dismissed every dream I ever shared? When you turned my achievements into cute little hobbies? Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, nobody said you weren't smart. Yes, you did. All of you.
Every time you celebrated his successes without acknowledging mine. Every time you offered to get me a real job instead of asking about the business I've already built. Every time you made me feel like I had to apologize for existing differently than you expected. I picked up my purse from the sideboard, hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your version of success. I'm building something you can't understand because you've never bothered to try. My mother stood, reaching toward me with a perfectly manicured hand. Sweetheart, please don't leave angry. We can talk about this. We can't, I said softly, because talking requires listening, and you stopped doing that a long time ago. I walked toward the front door, each step feeling lighter than the last. Behind me, I could hear my father's voice, harsh and defensive. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She can't handle constructive criticism. She's always been too emotional, too sensitive. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the three of them framed in the dining room doorway. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by their own narrow understanding of worth. You're wrong about me, I said. You've always been wrong about me. And the saddest part is you'll probably never realize it. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I took my first full breath in hours. My phone buzzed with a text from David. How's dinner? Call me when you're free. I smiled, typing back. Heading home now. I have so much to tell you. As I drove away from my child at home, I felt something shift inside me. A door closing on years of seeking validation from people who were constitutionally unable to give it. The energy I'd been pouring into that hopeless well could finally flow somewhere else. Somewhere it might actually make a difference. The office space we rented 6 months after that disastrous family dinner wasn't much to look at. 2 small rooms above Chen's Electronics on Main Street, with windows that overlooked the parking lot behind Murphy's coffee shop. But it was ours. The gold letters on the door read, Alvarez Chen Financial Consulting, in a font that David had agonized over for 3 days. It's perfect, I said, running my fingers over the lettering. Our names, equal billing, proof that I was building something real. Daniel smiled, jingling the keys in his palm. Ready to change some lives?
We'd been operating out of my apartment and various coffee shops for months, but having an actual office felt like crossing an invisible threshold. We weren't just freelancers anymore, we were a firm. The work consumed us in the best possible way. 18-hour days became the norm, fueled by takeout containers and the addictive satisfaction of solving other people's problems. David handled the operational consulting, while I focused on financial strategy. But we collaborated on everything. We developed systems, refined our processes, and discovered that we worked together like musicians who'd been playing the same song for years. Our client base had grown to 43 businesses by the end of our first year. Small restaurants, family-owned shops, service companies that the big consulting firms wouldn't touch. Each success story felt personal. Maria's Bakery finally turning a profit, the Johnson's Auto Repair Shop expanding to a second location, Thompson's Bookstore surviving the arrival of a chain competitor. But it was the letter from Carlos Martinez that changed everything. Carlos owned a small landscaping company that had been bleeding money for 2 years when he came to us. His books were a disaster, his pricing strategy non-existent, and he was 3 months behind on his business loan payments. Most accountants would have told him to file for bankruptcy. Instead, David and I spent 6 weeks completely restructuring his operation. We analyzed every job he'd done in the past year, identified his most profitable services, and helped him develop a pricing model that reflected his actual costs. I created financial projections that showed him exactly how much he needed to charge to not just survive, but thrive. The transformation was remarkable. Within 4 months, Carlos had caught up on his loan payments. Within 6 months, he'd hired 2 additional employees. By the end of the year, he was booking jobs 3 months in advance. That's when he sent the letter that made me cry at my desk. Dear Sophia and David, it read in Carlos's careful handwriting. I know you probably don't remember, but when I first came to your office, I was ready to give up.
I thought I was just bad at business, that I'd never be able to support my family doing what I loved. You didn't just help me with numbers, you helped me see that I had value, that my work mattered. My daughter Sophia is starting high school next year, and now I can afford to send her to that private school she wants to attend. Because of you, she'll have opportunities I never had. I don't know how to thank you for giving me my dream back. I sat in our small office staring at that letter through tears I couldn't control. David found me there an hour later, still holding the piece of paper like it was made of gold. "You okay?" he asked, settling into the chair beside my desk. I handed him the letter. "Read this." He read silently, his expression growing softer with each sentence. When he finished, he looked up at me with understanding in his eyes. "This is why we do it," he said simply. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of tea, thinking about Carlos's daughter, Sophia Martinez, getting opportunities her father never had. It made me think about all the other kids like her, smart, ambitious, full of potential, but limited by their family's resources. I opened a new spreadsheet and started calculating. Our business was doing well enough that we could afford to live modestly while saving a significant portion of our profits. What if, instead of just helping businesses succeed, we could help the next generation access education? The idea that took shape over the following weeks was simple: a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from working-class families. Kids whose parents owned small businesses, whose dreams were bigger than their circumstances, who just needed someone to believe in their potential. I researched how endowments worked, talked to financial advisors about the best ways to structure charitable giving, and slowly began setting aside money from our business profits. $500 the first month, then $1,000, then $1,500 as our client base grew. David was immediately supportive when I told him about the plan. "This is brilliant, Sophia. You're not just changing individual businesses, you're investing in entire futures." Aunt Rosa cried when I explained what I was doing during one of our monthly coffee dates. "Mija," she said, reaching across the small cafe table to squeeze my hand, "you're rewriting your own story, taking the pain they caused you and turning it into hope for other people." I said, "It feels right, like this is what I was always supposed to be building towards." The scholarship fund grew slowly but steadily over the next 2 years. $2,000, then $5,000, then $10,000. I researched colleges with strong support systems for first-generation students, reading everything I could about effective scholarship programs and educational access initiatives. The breakthrough came during our 3rd year of operation. We'd helped a struggling tech startup restructure their finances and develop a sustainable growth plan. 6 months later, they were acquired by a larger company for enough money to make our consulting fee look like pocket change. Their founder, grateful for what we'd done, referred us to 3 other startups facing similar challenges.
Suddenly, we weren't just working with mom and pop shops anymore. We were helping young entrepreneurs navigate the complex financial landscape of building scalable businesses. The work was more challenging, more lucrative, and infinitely satisfying. I increased my scholarship contributions to $5,000 a month. By the end of that year, I had enough saved to establish a real endowment. Not just a fund that would help a few students, but something substantial enough to make a lasting impact. I started researching universities with strong need-based aid programs, looking for the right place to plant the seed I've been nurturing. The application process was more complex than I had expected. Forms about my background, my motivations, the criteria I wanted for scholarship recipients. I wrote essay after essay about why education access mattered, about the potential that gets wasted when talented kids are told they're not college material. I never mentioned Harvard specifically during those early applications, but something about their first-generation student support programs caught my attention. Their financial aid was generous, their retention rates impressive, and they had a track record of helping students from modest backgrounds not just survive, but thrive. When the email came asking if I'd be interested in discussing a potential partnership with their scholarship office, my heart stopped. "David," I called from my desk, staring at my laptop screen, "I think Harvard wants to talk to me." He appeared in my office doorway instantly. "What do you mean?" I turned the laptop toward him, showing him the email from Dr. Elaine Brooks, Director of Philanthropic Partnerships. The subject line read,
Scholarship endowment opportunity. Discussion requested. David right over my shoulder, his hand coming to rest on my back. Sophia, he said quietly, this is incredible. I stared at the screen, thinking about that 17-year-old girl who'd been told she was too stupid for college. That girl who dreamed of lecture halls and literary discussions, who'd been dismissed as unrealistic and impractical. Now, Harvard was asking to partner with me. Should I respond? I asked. David squeezed my shoulder. What do you think? I thought about Carlos Martinez's daughter, about all the other bright kids whose potential was being overlooked, about the scholarship applications that would cross this person's desk from students whose stories might echo my own. Yes, I said, my voice steady with certainty. I think I should. As I typed my response, I felt something I hadn't experienced since I was a child. The absolute conviction that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. My family's approval had never mattered less. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March, just as David and I were closing the office after a particularly productive day. We'd just signed our 50th client, a family-owned restaurant chain looking to expand into 3 new locations, and we're planning a quiet celebration dinner at our favorite Italian place. I almost didn't answer when I saw my mother's name on the caller ID. We'd spoken maybe 6 times in the 2 years since I'd walked out of that Sunday dinner, brief conversations about holidays and birthdays that felt more obligatory than genuine. Hi, Mom, I said, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder while I gathered files from my desk. Sophia. Her voice sounded strained, tired in a way I wasn't used to. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. The phrase stung, as it always did, as if anything I might be doing could possibly be important enough to interrupt. Just finishing up at the office. What's going on? There was a long pause, the kind of silence that typically preceded bad news or difficult requests. Your father's been having some health issues, heart problems. The doctor wants him to have a procedure. Not surgery exactly, but it's expensive. Our insurance doesn't cover all of it. I stopped gathering papers, my full attention now on the conversation. Is he okay? How serious is it? He's fine, sweetheart. Well, he will be fine, but the out-of-pocket costs are more than we can manage right now. You know how tight things have been since he cut back his hours at the firm? My father had been talking about semi-retirement for years, though I'd learned the second hand through brief mentions in our rare conversations. He'd reduced his client load at his accounting
Practice, claiming he wanted to enjoy his golden years while he was still healthy enough to travel. How much are we talking about? I asked. Another pause. 15,000. Maybe 18, depending on what additional tests they need to run. The number hit me like cold water. It was substantial but not impossible, certainly not for someone in Daniel's financial bracket. My brother's partnership track position had led to the full partnership he'd always wanted, complete with the 7-figure annual income that came with it. Have you talked to Daniel about this? I asked. The silence stretched longer this time. Your brother is very busy with a major acquisition right now, my mother said carefully. You know how demanding his work is, and, well, we were hoping you might be able to help us out. I sank into my office chair, staring out the window at the parking lot where David was loading equipment into his car. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents, who had consistently dismissed my career as irrelevant, now turning to me for financial support, while their golden child was apparently too important to be bothered. Mom, I said slowly, Daniel makes more money in a month than I make all year. Why isn't he helping? It's not that simple, Sophia. He has the house in Connecticut, and Vanessa's been wanting to renovate the kitchen, and with the children's private school tuition, she trailed off, as if the list of Daniel's expenses was somehow more valid than anyone else's financial obligations. And I don't have expenses? Of course you do, sweetheart, but your situation is different, more flexible. More flexible. Translation, less important. My business, my life, my financial planning, all of it was apparently just more flexible than Daniel's kitchen renovation and country club memberships. I thought about the conversation David and I had had just that morning, about expanding our office space, about hiring our first full-time employee to help manage our growing client base. I thought about the scholarship fund that I contributed to every month, about the students who would benefit from that money. But I also thought about my father, who,
despite everything, was still my father, lying in a hospital bed worried about money. "I'll transfer the money tomorrow," I heard myself saying. "Oh, Sophia, thank you. You don't know how much this means to us." Actually, I do. I know exactly what it means. It means I'm good enough when you need something. "That's not fair," my mother said, her voice taking on that wounded tone she used whenever anyone called out her behavior. "We've always appreciated you." "Have you? When was the last time you asked about my business? Do you even know how many employees David and I have now?" Well, I assumed it was just the two of you. "We have 6 employees, Mom. 6. People whose salaries I pay, whose families depend on the success of this business you've never taken seriously. We're about to sign a lease on a bigger office space because we've outgrown our current one." The pride in my voice surprised me. When had I stopped being defensive about my success and started owning it completely? "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm glad things are going well for you." But even as she said the words, I could hear the disconnect in her tone. She was pleased, in the abstract way you might be happy that a distant acquaintance got a promotion, but there was no real understanding of what I'd built, no genuine interest in my world. "I'll send the money," I repeated, suddenly exhausted from the conversation. "But Mom, next time you need financial help, call Daniel first. He's the successful one, remember?" After I hung up, I sat alone in the darkening office, watching the streetlights flicker on in the parking lot below. David knocked on my doorframe, keys jingling in his hand. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, then stopped when he saw my expression. "What happened?" I told him about the call, about my father's medical bills, about Daniel being too busy to help his own parents. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled with each detail. "Let me guess," he said when I finished. "They called you because they knew you'd say yes. They called me because I'm the backup plan, the reliable one who doesn't have a real life to interfere with their needs."
David sat down in the chair across from my desk, studying my face. "Are you going to send the money?" "I already said I would." "That's not what I asked." I leaned back in my chair, considering his question. Was I going to send the money? Despite the hurt, despite the pattern of being dismissed until I was needed, despite Daniel's convenient unavailability? "Yes," I said finally. "But this is the last time." "What do you mean?" I thought about the scholarship fund, about the students whose lives could be changed with $18,000 worth of educational opportunities. I thought about my parents, who loved me in their limited way, but had never understood me, never valued what I'd built. I mean, I'm done being their safety net while Daniel gets to be their pride and joy. I'm done accepting scraps of appreciation only when they need something. I looked at David, feeling something crystallize in my chest. I'm going to send them the money for Dad's medical bills, but after this, my financial resources go toward things that actually matter to me. Like the scholarship fund? Like the scholarship fund. That night, after transferring $18,000 to my parents' account and receiving an effusive text of gratitude from my mother, I sat down with my laptop and logged into the scholarship fund account. The balance had grown to just over $200,000, enough to establish a meaningful endowment, enough to change lives. I opened a new email and began typing. "Dear Dr. Brooks, thank you for your patience as I've considered your proposal. I'm ready to move forward with establishing the Sofia Alvarez First Generation Scholarship Fund we discussed. I'd like to schedule a call at your earliest convenience to discuss the details." As I typed, I thought about my parents, probably relieved and grateful in their own way, already moving on to other concerns now that this financial crisis was resolved. I thought about Daniel, maybe not even aware that there had been a crisis to begin with. But mostly, I thought about the students who would benefit from this endowment, kids like I had been, full of potential but written off by the people who were supposed to believe in them most. Those students would never know my name, would never know about the family that had dismissed me or the path that had led me to this moment. They would just know that someone, somewhere, believed in their potential enough to invest in their futures. That felt like the best possible use of my flexible resources. I hit send on the email and closed my laptop, finally ready for that celebration dinner. We had a lot to celebrate, even if my family would never understand exactly what I'd accomplished. The phone call came on a Thursday morning in September, just as I was reviewing quarterly projections for one of our restaurant clients. I'd been expecting Dr. Brooks to follow up on our preliminary discussions about the scholarship endowment, but something in her tone when I answered made me set down my pen and give her my complete attention. Ms. Alvarez, I'm calling with some rather extraordinary news. The scholarship committee has reviewed your proposal, and we'd like to move forward immediately with establishing the Sofia Alvarez First Generation Scholarship Fund. My heart stopped. Really? More than that, actually. Based on the size of your contribution and the thoughtful criteria you've outlined, Harvard would like to formally recognize this gift at our annual philanthropic recognition ceremony next month. This is quite unusual for someone your age, and frankly, the committee was impressed not just by your generosity, but your insight into the challenges facing first-generation college students. I gripped the phone tighter, hardly believing what I was hearing. What does that mean exactly? It means you'll be introduced to the university community as one of our major benefactors. The president will personally acknowledge your contribution, and you'll have the opportunity to address the scholarship recipients, the first class of students who will benefit from your fund. The room seemed to spin slightly. Me, addressing students at Harvard. The university my father had said I was too stupid to attend was now asking me to speak to their students about overcoming obstacles to education. Dr. Brooks, I said slowly, can you tell me exactly what this recognition involves? Of course. There will be a formal ceremony in Sandra's Theater, followed by a reception with faculty, administrators, and scholarship recipients. We typically invite about 200 people, donors, university leadership, and the students themselves. It's quite an honor, Miss Alvarez. In my 15 years here, I've rarely seen someone so young make such a significant impact on educational access.
After I hung up, I sat in my office chair staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. David found me there 20 minutes later when he came back from a client meeting. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Harvard wants to honor me," I said, the words sounding surreal as they left my mouth, "at a ceremony with speeches and everything." David's face broke into a grin that could have powered our entire office building. "Sophia, that's incredible. Tell me everything." I recounted the conversation, watching David's expression grow more amazed with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, just looking at me with something like awe. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked finally. "That I'm going to throw up from nerves?" He laughed. "It means Harvard University, arguably the most prestigious academic institution in the world, is publicly acknowledging your intelligence, your success, and your impact. The same Harvard your father said you'd never be smart enough to attend." The irony hit me like a physical force. I wasn't going to Harvard as a student. I was going as a benefactor, someone who had built something significant enough to change other students' lives. "I need to call Aunt Rosa," I said suddenly. Rosa cried when I told her. Actually cried right there in the middle of the grocery store where she'd been shopping when I reached her. "Mija," she said through her tears, "do you remember what I told you that night after your father, after that terrible dinner? That I see the world differently? That you would find your own way to greatness. And look, Harvard University is calling you great." That evening, David and I sat on my apartment balcony with takeout containers and a bottle of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. I kept looking at my phone, expecting Dr. Brooks to call back and tell me that it had all been a mistake. "Are you going to tell your family?" David asked. The question I'd been avoiding all day. My parents, who had just accepted $18,000 from me while Daniel remained mysteriously unavailable,
Daniel, who had always been the family's Harvard story, their proof of intellectual success. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to see their faces when they find out, but part of me wants to keep this mine, something they can't diminish or dismiss. David nodded thoughtfully. It's your choice. But, Sophia, yeah? Whatever you decide, don't let them make this about them. This is your achievement, your recognition. You earned this through your work, your vision, your generosity. Not because of them, and not in spite of them, because of who you are. I thought about that 17-year-old girl who had been told her dreams were unrealistic, who had been labeled too stupid for the very institution that was now honoring her. That girl could never have imagined this moment, could never have envisioned a path from dismissed daughter to recognized philanthropist. I think I want them to find out, I said slowly, but not from me. Let them discover it the way they discover everything else about my life, by accident, too late to be part of it. David raised his wine glass. To taking the high road. To taking my own road, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I felt something shift inside me. The girl who had once desperately craved her family's approval was finally fully gone. In her place sat a woman who had built something meaningful, something lasting, something that would echo through the lives of students she'd never meet. The recognition from Harvard was wonderful, validating in ways I'd never expected, but the real triumph was simpler than that. I had become someone I was proud to be, regardless of who was watching. The news found them before I was ready. I'd planned to keep the Harvard recognition quiet, at least until after the ceremony, but I'd forgotten about social media, about press releases, about the way good news travels in unexpected directions. Aunt Rosa posted first, a proud Facebook announcement with a photo of me from our business website, captioned, "My brilliant niece Sophia being honored by Harvard University for her scholarship endowment. So proud of this amazing woman."
Then came the local newspaper article. Local entrepreneur establishes Harvard Scholarship Fund. They'd found our business photos somehow, the one from our website showing David and me in front of our office sign. The article was small, buried on page 6, but it mentioned the recognition ceremony and the size of the endowment. My phone started ringing at 7:43 a.m. on a Saturday. "Sophia." Daniel's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear something else underneath. Confusion, maybe even hurt. "I just saw something online about you and Harvard." I was still in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, trying to wake up properly. "Good morning to you too, Daniel." "Is it true you've donated money to Harvard?" The way he said donated money made it sound like I'd been caught doing something embarrassing. "I've established a scholarship endowment, yes." "How much money are we talking about?" I almost laughed at the bluntness of the question. "That's really none of your business." "Sophia, this is insane. Where did you get that kind of money? Did you marry rich or something?" The assumption stung, even though I'd expected it. Of course, Daniel couldn't imagine that I'd earned significant money through my own work. In his worldview, wealth came through prestigious jobs at established firms, not through the kind of little business I ran. "I earned it," I said simply, "through my consulting firm, the one you've never bothered to ask about." There was silence on the other end, the kind of quiet that suggested he was recalibrating his understanding of my life. "This doesn't make sense. Small business consulting doesn't generate the kind of money needed for Harvard endowments." "You're right," I said, surprising him. "Traditional small business consulting doesn't, but we don't do traditional consulting. We do strategic financial restructuring, operational optimization, growth planning. Essentially, we help businesses transform themselves. Our clients pay us well because we deliver results." "How much?" he asked again. "The endowment? Enough to support a meaningful number of students each year." That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. My second line was beeping. Mom calling. I ignored it. "Dad's gonna want to talk to you. He's confused about all this." "I bet he is." The line went quiet again.
When Daniel spoke next, his voice had changed. The controlled big brother tone was gone, replaced with something that sounded almost vulnerable. Why didn't you tell us? About the business, about the money, about any of this? The question caught me off guard. For a moment, I heard echoes of the brother I'd grown up with, before the competition and comparisons had hardened us against each other. When would I have told you, Daniel? During one of our frequent conversations about my life? Oh, wait, we don't have those. You call when you need something, and the rest of the time, you're too busy to notice I exist. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my business, or my life, or anything that didn't directly impact you? He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. I saw the article, he said finally. It mentioned the ceremony. Harvard is recognizing you publicly. Yes. That's a big deal, Soph. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. I know. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. I should have said that first. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was my father. I have to go, Daniel. Dad's calling. Sophia, wait. Just be careful, okay? You know how he gets when he's blindsided. I answered the second call, steeling myself.
Sophia Marie Alvarez. My father's voice was cold, formal, the way he spoke to clients who had disappointed him. I just heard the most interesting news from your Aunt Rosa. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling? Is your heart okay after the procedure? Don't change the subject. Is it true that you've given money to Harvard University? A substantial amount of money. Yes, it's true. Why? The single word carried years of frustration, confusion, and what might have been hurt. Why would you do that without discussing it with your family? Because it's my money and it's my decision. That's not how families work, Sophia. When someone makes a decision this significant, this public, it affects everyone. I sank onto my couch, suddenly exhausted. How does my donation to Harvard affect you, Dad? It reflects on us. People will ask questions. Where did she get this money? Why didn't her family know? What kind of parents are we that our daughter makes major financial decisions without involving us? And there it was. Not pride in what I'd accomplished, not joy that I was helping other students, but worry about what people would think of them. Maybe you should have thought about that before you spent 28 years dismissing everything I cared about. That's ridiculous. We've always supported you. When? When have you supported me? We just borrowed money from you for your father's medical bills, my mother's voice called from the background. She'd clearly been listening to the entire conversation. That's not support, Mom. That's using me as a bank account. My father's voice got sharper. You're being ungrateful and dramatic. We've given you everything. No, I interrupted, feeling years of suppressed anger rising to the surface. You gave Daniel everything. You gave me criticism and low expectations. You told me I was too stupid for college, remember? And now you're upset that the college you said I wasn't smart enough for is honoring me? The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of accumulated hurt. The ceremony is next weekend. If you want to come, you're welcome. But don't come expecting me to apologize for succeeding in ways you never imagined I could. I hung up before he could respond. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father is very hurt. This isn't how we raised you to treat your family. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. This is exactly how you raised me to treat people who don't value me. I learned from the best. I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the morning in silence, processing the conversations and the hurt they'd stirred up. But underneath the familiar pain was something new, a deep, unshakable certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do, with or without their understanding. Harvard University's Sanders Theater
was more beautiful than I had imagined. The wood paneling seemed to glow in the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, and the curved rows of seats created an intimate amphitheater that had hosted countless speeches, performances, and ceremonies over more than a century. I sat in the front row with other honorees, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from trembling. David sat 3 rows behind me, having insisted that this was my moment to shine alone. Aunt Rosa was beside him, tears already threatening to spill over her carefully applied mascara. My family hadn't come. I'd left them 3 voicemails with the ceremony details, but my phone had remained silent all week. Part of me was relieved. This moment felt too precious to risk having it tainted by their complicated reactions. Dr. Brooks stood at the podium, elegant in her navy dress and Harvard-branded scarf, addressing the gathered crowd of faculty, students, and benefactors. Today, we celebrate not just generosity, but vision. The individuals we honor have seen beyond their own circumstances to create opportunities for others. They understand that education is not just personal advancement, it's societal transformation. I half listened to the opening remarks, my mind wandering to the 17-year-old version of myself who had sat at our dinner table, tentatively suggesting that she might want to study literature. That girl could never have imagined sitting here, waiting to be recognized as a major benefactor to the very institution she'd been told she wasn't smart enough to attend.
Our next honoree, Dr. Brooks continued, exemplifies the entrepreneurial spirit and social consciousness that Harvard seeks to foster in all our graduates. Though she never attended Harvard as a student, Ms. Sofia Alvarez has demonstrated that impact and intelligence take many forms. My heart started beating faster as she continued. At just 31 years old, Ms. Alvarez has built a successful financial consulting firm that specializes in helping small businesses, particularly those owned by immigrants and first-generation Americans, achieve sustainable growth. But more than that, she has used her success to create opportunities for others. Dr. Brooks smiled directly at me. The Sofia Alvarez First Generation Scholarship Fund will support students whose potential might otherwise go unrecognized, whose dreams might be dismissed as unrealistic by others who cannot envision their success. Ms. Alvarez understands that intelligence and ambition are not limited by circumstances, they simply need the right opportunity to flourish. The applause began before she finished speaking. I stood on shaky legs and walked to the podium, looking out at faces that reflected back genuine warmth and respect. "Thank you," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. When Dr. Brooks first contacted me about this opportunity, I was surprised, not just by Harvard's interest in my contribution, but by my own reaction to that interest. I paused, finding David's encouraging smile in the audience. You see, I was once told I was too stupid for college, not by strangers, not by teachers who didn't know me well, but by people who were supposed to believe in my potential most fiercely. For years, I carried that judgment like a weight, believing that perhaps they were right, that my dreams were indeed unrealistic. The audience was completely still, hanging on every word. But here's what I learned. Intelligence isn't measured by other people's limited understanding of what success looks like. Intelligence is curiosity, it's persistence, it's the ability to see solutions where others see only problems. It's the courage to build something meaningful, even when no one believes you can. I looked around the beautiful theater at the students who were receiving scholarships, at the faculty who dedicated their lives to education. The students who will benefit from this scholarship fund are not charity cases. They are investments in our collective future. They are the first in their families to attend college not because their families lack intelligence, but because their families lacked opportunity. These students carry not just their own dreams, but the dreams of parents who worked multiple jobs, who learned English as adults, who sacrificed everything so their children could reach higher. My voice grew stronger with each sentence. I'm honored to be part of their journey, to help prove that potential exists everywhere, in the child of immigrants working in their family restaurant, in the kid from a small town who dreams of changing the world, in the young woman who's been told her ambitions are unrealistic. I paused, thinking of Carlos Martinez's daughter, Sofia, who would be applying to colleges soon. Education saved me, even though I never sat in these classrooms. It saved me because I refused to accept someone else's definition of my capabilities. These scholarship recipients will go on to save others through medical research, through literature that changes perspectives, through businesses that create jobs and opportunities, through teaching the next generation that their dreams matter. The applause started before I finished my last sentence, building to a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. As I returned to my seat, I caught sight of something that made my breath catch. In the back of the theater, barely visible in the doorway, stood my father. He was alone, wearing his best suit, his face a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite read from this distance. Our eyes met for just a moment before he turned and disappeared into the hallway. After the ceremony, during the reception in the faculty club, students approached me one by one to thank me. Maria, a sophomore studying pre-med, whose parents owned a small grocery store. James, a senior from rural Montana who was the first in his family to graduate high school, let alone college. Sarah, whose single mother cleaned office buildings at night to support her daughter's education. Each story reminded me why this mattered, why the rejection and dismissal I had experienced had ultimately led to something meaningful. "Miss Alvarez?" A familiar voice made me turn. My father stood a few feet away, looking older somehow, uncertain in a way I rarely seem. "Dad," I set down my champagne glass. "You came." I almost didn't. He looked around the elegant room, taking in the Harvard crests on the walls, the distinguished faculty members, the confident students. "I spent the week trying to understand how you got here, how the daughter I thought I knew became this. I'm still the same person, Dad. I just stopped waiting for your permission to become who I was always meant to be."
He nodded slowly. "That speech you gave, about being told you were too stupid for college," his voice grew quiet. "That was about me. It was about a lot of things. No, it was about me. And I was wrong, Sophia. I was wrong about you, wrong about what intelligence looks like, wrong about what success means." The words I'd waited my entire life to hear hung between us in the elegant reception room. "I know," I said simply. "Can you forgive me?" I looked at my father, this man who had shaped so much of my pain and, inadvertently, so much of my strength. "I already have," I said. "But Dad, I didn't do this for your approval. I don't need it anymore." He smiled then, a real smile, sad, but genuine. "I know. And that's how I finally understand that I raised a remarkable daughter." As he walked away, I felt the last piece of that old wound finally heal. Not because he'd apologized, but because I'd realized his approval had never been necessary for my success. I was exactly smart enough, exactly ambitious enough, exactly worthy enough. All on my own. 6 months later, I hosted Thanksgiving in our new house. David and I had finally bought a place together with a dining room big enough for the family that mattered. Aunt Rosa carved the turkey while David's parents shared business stories with our team from the consulting firm. Maria, one of our first scholarship recipients, was home from Harvard for the holiday and helped serve dessert she'd made from her grandmother's recipe. My parents had called several times since the Harvard ceremony, tentative attempts at rebuilding bridges. I'd answered some calls, ignored others. Healing would take time, if it happened at all. But tonight, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love and support me, I raised my glass of wine and smiled. To the family we build, not the one that breaks us. The chorus of agreement warmed me more than any parental approval ever could have. I was finally, completely, home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.